What is going on, everyone? Welcome back to Real Reds Talk, an authentic football fan channel dedicated to Manchester United. As you can see, we have a special guest on today. I mean, we were just discussing off camera there that we've been following these guys for a while. The work that they put in is top level, and we really appreciate you coming on. So, yeah, James, first and foremost, how are you?
Good. Thanks for having me on. Appreciate it. How are you all today?
Yeah, great. This is a big pleasure for us to have you on the channel. So we, again, like I said, we really appreciate it. If any of you guys have any questions at all that you want to pop in the chat, we'll try and get into them near the end. But we have got quite a lot of topics to discuss. So Dave, if you want to kick us off.
Yeah, man. So as I'm sure you'll know, the way you put out shows, we were just having a discussion in our group chat about what kind of graphics we're going to put out for today. And, being the absolute jokester that I am, I jokingly said, oh, just whack a picture of Kermit the Frog on there. Muppets, Muppetiers. Yeah. So, yeah, that being said, it did get me thinking, who is your favourite Muppet, James, and why?
Well, it is funny because the Muppeteers theme and the Muppets was a good part of the original starting of the Muppeteers. And I would probably say Cookie Monster is my favorite overall.
Oh.
Yeah, but we have kind of like, it sounds unbelievably ridiculous to say, but part of this community and leaning into it is the bit of the silliness of it all. We have Kermit lore. When we started out, we used to name these anonymous people Muppet names. If you've been following a long time, you know that. Like way in the beginning, we'd name anonymous sources different Muppet names, and Kermit was probably the craziest one of all back in the original days. So, but yeah, for me, Cookie Monster overall, I would say.
Yeah, I'm more of an animal man myself.
Yeah,
big fan of the animal.
that's a good one.
Yeah,
That's
and
a
a
good
tradition. Me and my brother, who's on this channel, as well. We have a tradition every single year where we watch kind of Muppets Christmas Carol, and yeah, it's a big thing for us. But yeah, I don't know how to kind of segue from the Muppets to football, but I'm going to do it anyway.
James has been doing it.
This what? Sorry,
James has been doing it his whole YouTube.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, we'll just dive straight into it. There's no other way to kind of think it. I wanted to start with Mason Mount, James.
Yeah.
I was wondering if you could kind of clarify the situation with Mason Mount, because you've got some reports coming out, I think, from the Telegraph and a couple of other journalists saying we've agreed personal terms with the player, and then I think Romano put a tweet out today saying that maybe that isn't the case. If you provide any kind of clarity on that for us, please.
Yeah, for sure. One of the things you kind of find over time in dealing with the transfer reports, I mean, this is one of the reasons that we started in the first place and gained popularity, is you get so much conflicting info over these types of details all the time, right? Every single report, you'll get, a tier 1 journalist who says one thing, they're not wrong, but they say one thing, somebody else says something a little bit different. What's the honest truth of it behind it? And usually a lot of things like this come down to semantics overall, what is being said versus the actual, I guess, explicit reality of the situation. So it takes a little bit of explaining here, and I have a pretty good insight into this Mount situation overall, which I think helps. I don't always know, I get what I can, but on this one I do. And what I can say is that, the way a lot of these transfers will go initially is the player or the representatives or agents, which sometimes are very close to them. In this case, Mason Mount's family, I believe, is involved in representation of him as well in the transfer. And they'll present essentially what are their terms to interested parties. This is what we're asking for. This is what we're looking for as one of the first steps of exploration. The club want to know, in this case for Manchester United, is Mason Mount willing to join Manchester United? What are your wage demands? What kind of contract are you looking for? This is a simplistic way of looking at it, of course, but they've done all of that. They've had some very direct conversations with him. They've known for some time he would prefer to join United. Jurgen Klopp and Liverpool were trying to get him, and up until very recently, we're probably ahead of the race on this and leading towards it. They also knew his contract demands. You wouldn't say they've agreed terms, but they kind of had as well. They knew this is what you want, we're willing to pay it. And that's where United are at too. They've had in-depth discussions multiple times. They have very much a willingness from him to join. and they know exactly what his wage demands are, what contract he would accept. And in that essence, from their side, they look at it like, yeah, we've agreed terms. We're willing to pay what he wants. Have they sat down and formalized a contract offer? No, they have not. And so you get it kind of different from both parties in terms of what they actually want from it. Why would United like it to be sounding like they've agreed terms with them? Because that's going to push Arsenal and Liverpool out of the picture here. And obviously the big challenge to overcome in any of this is not going to be him. He wants United. They're willing to pay. It's going to be the fee. And the more competition there is for Mason Mount, if Liverpool and Arsenal are willing to put offers in, then the more that they can drive that fee up. They do need to sell him. They don't want his contract to expire. They're not likely to re-sign him. And so it's just a little bit of the game being played. From his side, there is the matter of he's a Chelsea boy. And he does not want to give the representation like he's forcing his way out of Chelsea, like he's doing anything untoward, going behind their back, all of that. That's going to be important for him. He's very well liked among Chelsea fans, among Chelsea staff, among the whole organization. He's a good kid, and people like him. And so, you get that with these things. The players really usually don't want to look like they're forcing their way out. Chelsea will hope that other clubs are still interested, but the more United can push it, the less Arsenal, Liverpool are going to be sitting there trying to push on a potentially a failed transfer or a transfer that appears that the player really wants to go to Manchester United. So I would just advise not to worry too much about the semantics. If it's being said by United side journalists like it is, Telegraph, Jason Burt, Ducker, who are generally very good for United, it's being said for a reason. From the other side, in the London-based journalists and outside United, they're kind of saying it more personal terms won't be an issue. That's probably more accurate, but the truth is kind of in between, and it doesn't really matter that much.
Well, they certainly play. I've always been a big fan of. I know it's quite kind of divisive, and some people have said you don't want this player. It's an Ollie signing and these kind of things. But I think he'd fit the perfect system. The system perfect. Sorry, Dave. Just before you get into your bit, I just want to say make sure you smash the like on the video, guys. By the way, subscribe to the channel if you are new around these parts. Like we said, we're going to try and get a few questions towards the end, but we've got a few things we want to discuss first. So, Dave, do you want to?
Yeah, keeping on the Mount situation and the idea that he could elicit some sort of a mixed emotions from people who've been linked to him, particularly because of all the noise surrounding Frankie de Jong last summer. Everyone seems to think that we need this kind of first base specialist midfielder, and it seemed that Ten Hag wanted that too. Like, that was no secret, but it feels like now we're moving away from that and we're moving towards more of a dynamic 8/10 and away from this first base specialist, away from the Ajax 18-19 season, more to the Ajax 21-22 season. And I was just wondering, like, is that your thoughts on it too?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's funny because, when the first link to Mount came up back in March, I tweeted it, and I stand by, things I tweet that end up being wrong later on, even in my opinions and all that too, rather than deleting them. I was like, this doesn't make any sense. Expensive. I knew he wanted, pretty high wages. It didn't seem like it solved the problem, right? And that's still how some people are looking at it now. Like, we have Bruno, we have Eriksen. Mason Mount's not your, deep midfielder like a Frankie de Jong. He's not dropping into your back line, picking the ball up and moving it forward through the first and second phases. He's not doing that. What kind of problem does he solve? But you have seen, there's two sides of that you've seen. It's something I talked about in a few of the videos I've done, which was you saw it on the pitch a little bit with, especially maybe when Fred was in while Eriksen was out injured. You could see the two dynamic eights where Bruno was coming deep, was unleashed a bit to press higher. And one of the things you got to bear in mind is Mason Mount, I think, is one of two midfielders who presses as much as Fred in the entire Premier League. He's up there.
With McAllister as well, right? In kind of the top five.
And then Conor Gallagher, I think, is the other one at Chelsea as well. But they press hard, they press high, and we won big games like that. There's consistency of Fred. Does he have the top level ability? When he's on, it's like you can see how dynamic and how strong United can be, beating City, beating Barcelona, these types of things. But you want that better Fred, as I've talked about a few times, is
Yeah.
my opinion always, that getting a better Fred makes sense. Moving Eriksson to more of a depth because he doesn't have the legs for it anymore, frankly. You can see that pre and post injury as the season went on, he tired. He doesn't last the second half in the final versus it's the final. Yeah, right. Or maybe it was, but anyway, one of the games versus Brighton. It was the final, right? The cup final.
There was a game against Man City where at the Etihad where Eriksson looked really leggy, and that's where it was like the first kind of big showing for me. Where I was like, he's struggling off the ball physically and mobility wise.
Yeah, and you can see it, and so I think that there is a bit of that transition to, as you said, the later Ajax sides where you're getting more of the fullback is tucking in as that extra deep midfield progressor, and it's more like a 3-2-5 type of setup, which is not dissimilar to Arteta. It's not dissimilar to Pep. It's a pretty common modern system now where you get those two dynamic eights. You don't have to play that every game, but being able to do that for all those little games where you're struggling to get goals, that's how you're going to dominate these smaller teams, especially, and that's most of your games. Your 10, 12 of your Premier League games a year, you want to be able to score against those low blocks, dominate possession, dominate the counter press, play high. And there was definitely a profile of scouting and targets that seemed to match it, with McAllister obviously being the other notable name there, Gabri Vega. I'm sure there were others that I forget off the top of my head now, but Mount seems to be the one that's of choice here, and with Liverpool getting McAllister seems to be the one that makes sense.
100%.
Do you feel like it was basically De Jong or bust then for the trying to do the other system?
To some degree, it's funny because obviously even now, and I'm not totally sure what to make of it yet, you have talk about like Declan Rice, he's not like Frankie de Jong, obviously, but he's obviously has more experience as a bit of a deeper midfielder where if you're playing more of the general 4-2-3-1, then Declan Rice, I don't know, Declan Rice, Casemiro and Bruno feels like a very strong midfield, but it also feels a little bit not dynamic in in what it can do, even though I really rate Declan Rice like very, very highly as a player. I think he's fantastic, and long-term replacing Casemiro,
I think that's the key there. I think Rice would be the Casemiro replacement.
That would be the ideal, right, in a couple of years. But it seemed like it was Frankie de Jong or bust. And last preseason, you even saw, Fred playing a solo role in the same two dynamic eights midfield. He was the only option at the time, and we started the season and it didn't work, right? It was horrific. Because we didn't have the players for it, and we didn't get de Jong. And then we brought Casemiro in, and he went to a bit more of a pragmatic setup. But over the season, I feel you've kind of seen it going back that way.
Yeah, you do.
And I think that's where he wants to get this summer. So it makes a lot of sense in that regard.
Well, there's a lot of people in the chat. Let us know how you feel about Mason Mount. Saints put a super chat and saying not a fan of Mount, but if Ten Hag wants him, I think that's the key point for me. I am a massive fan, but regardless, I think you have to back your manager in that kind of sense. Like everything he's done this summer has pretty much come off. I mean, Anthony's, it's his first year, still bedding in, but a lot of the signings I feel have been fantastic. So there's no reason not to trust Eric Ten Hag in that sense. And whilst we're on the topic of transfers, kind of sticking with the theme of it, how do you think United are going to go into this one? Quick deals done. It seems like they're actually trying to get deals done early for once, which thank God, because we've been asking for about 10 years. And what are the implications of FFP? Will a new owner change the situation?
Yeah, so a lot to unpack there, obviously. FFP is a funny one because for some months you saw reports about, limited by FFP, 100 million budget, things like that. And then, end of May rolls around and you're seeing Harry Kane for 100 million, Mount for 50, 60 million, Rice on top of that, maybe a center back, maybe a goalkeeper. And you're thinking, hang on a second. Based on the numbers that I kind of tried to explain a while back, FFP thing never seemed like an issue to me. United have pretty healthy revenues. The percentage cap is a year by year cap. Going into this season, it's 90%. The 70% cap that I think a lot of the math was being done off of doesn't kick in for another couple seasons. It's 90, then 80, then 70. So there's no real issue with FFP. I think they could practically do whatever they want, and there's not going to be an FFP issue. Putting that kind of to bed. Obviously, any outs help. Sales like Scott McTominay, where it's pure profit because there's no transfer fee paid for him, have a huge impact on FFP and the ability to spend. In terms of how United are going about it, it's tricky because there's how they want to go about it, and then there's the takeover, which I'm sure we'll talk about a bit.
Oh yeah.
And there's the Glazers, because there's always the Glazers. There's always the Glazer part of this entire thing, at least right now anyway. They're still there. Seasons past, it's not that in many instances they weren't moving forward on deals, but a matter of how do you get, the wallet opened when it's necessary. They could line it all up and be told, look, I mean, this is what happened last summer. Until Frankie de Jong is resolved, we're not going to buy other things. We're not going to buy other players. We're not going to do anything else. And so you saw it was all locked up, and then they could finally start moving on the cheap ones, like Eriksson on a free. Malaysia was only 12 million or so. And then when it looked like, okay, de Jong's not happening, suddenly you're getting, Lisandro Martinez, and then they came and asked for more money. Casemiro, Anthony spent a whole boatload in the end. But that wasn't available earlier in the window, whether they wanted to or not. And at this point in time, I know that Erik ten Hag and John Murtaugh are working pretty over the top on transfers. They've been talking to people for months on this, and they're exploring everything. There's I think they're doing quite a job, actually. When you look at the way that the striker thing is being lined up, obviously Harry Kane, someone that they want so much. But at the same time, they've got 3 or 4 others lined up that they're already talking to. With Holland, as one that I would definitely very, very strongly keep an eye on. I think the fact that it's getting mentioned now is a big indication. Obviously, you've had players like Gonzalo Ramos. Ten Hag likes him. They've watched him, but it would also be very expensive. You've got other names. They were even in talked about players like Victor Roque from Brazil and all of that. And so they're doing a lot. I mean, they're doing a lot, lining up many, many targets. The midfield's a good example. They had Gabri Veiga watched, they had McAllister watched, and they were able to move on Mount because these other ones weren't coming through, or, they weren't able to get there in time. So they're busy. I think they will have as many as 3 deals lined up by mid-June. It's just a matter of if they're going to be able to move forward on the spending on all of those by that point in time. And that really comes down to the Glazers and the takeover, because everything right now runs through Joel Glazer at the end of the day for approval. It could take time to get those approved, and things change while you're waiting in that period. And so I think the deals are there to be done, to be knocked down one after another, kind of how you saw it almost last year. Out of the blue, it was like 1, 2, 3. It just was too late. It was after July. It needs to be earlier now.
Yep.
They're getting it there.
Yeah.
The Glazers. What can you say? I mean, that's the only thing that will hold it back from getting done. And not even necessarily budget-wise, just to be clear. Even if the Glazers stayed, which I'm not saying they will, I'm not saying they should, I'm not saying anybody wants them to, the club will spend 150 plus this summer.
Okay, interesting. Shreyas, did you want to?
Yeah. My question was that with the unclarity about who will come in, whether it will be Qatar or whether it will be Sir Jim Ratcliffe, do you think it affects the kind of players we target? Like, because we've seen that with PSG and Qatar, we've seen Qatar going in for a certain profile of players when they buy certain players, and with Sir Jim, when he was rumored to sign Manchester United, we were seeing players like Declan Rice being rumored a lot. So do you think it affects which kind of marquee players we will sign in this summer?
Not only just that, just sorry to add on it as well, with Nice, the transfer kind of policy there. I know it's a different club. I know Nice is completely, it's a smaller club to Manchester United, quite frankly. But the strategy that he's gone there, you've seen these kind of older players coming in from the Premier League. They're called washed. I'm not going to be as disrespectful, but you take my point.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. I get that. And it's a tough question because obviously it depends on the when. As of now, just to be clear on this, even if I lean towards, and I'm sure we'll talk about it, the likelihood of Ineos being the ones who take over, I don't think they're having any input presently. I don't think anybody on this takeover process is having any input on who the club is targeting and signing or looking at right now. And I think given the timing of things, it's more likely that this summer, whoever takes over, they will say, who do you want? And we'll help to make sure that happens. Part of it is obviously, getting a feel for the strategy. You don't want to come in and pretend you're an expert. You want football people running the club. The other aspect to it is who's the guy with the most, I guess, way in the entire United fan base right now? It's Erik ten Hag, without a question. And so you're going to give him what he wants. That's your best way into the club. That's the best way to get fans on your side. It's the best way to support the current process. And I think whoever takes over, it's more likely they're going to follow the process that's already in motion. And then maybe towards the end of summer or after some of the primary targets are gotten, which will probably happen or be far along the line before anything can even be 100% finalized anyway. Maybe what will happen is you'll see those extra names. I mean, that's what I'm hoping for, that they can get Mount, they can get a striker in, they can get a second midfielder in, but maybe once the takeover happens, then the money opens up for bringing in Diogo Costa as a goalkeeper, someone where they probably aren't looking to spend that much money this summer. Then the purse strings open a bit and you can get some bigger names in other positions coming in too. I think it's unlikely, though, that they're going to have a huge effect on the actual names themselves this summer.
Dave?
Yeah, one of the last things on transfers. You mentioned Costa then. I feel like, this is probably just like my opinion, it feels like the numbers are kind of smaller in certain areas to potentially free up a move for someone like Costa. But obviously, with that being in mind as well.
Yeah, it is.
Sorry.
Yeah, no, I've been thinking the same thing when you mention it, because if you take like Holland, for example, and you spend what you spend there instead of 100 million on Kane or 100 plus all the wages, you can imagine the wages for someone like Holland are going to be astronomically lower than Harry Kane, where you're talking top wages at the club, 400,000 a week versus maybe 150, 125. The amount of financial room it gives you probably funds that goalkeeper on its own, right?
Yeah.
And so I've had the same thought. I've been thinking myself, well, if they sign Rabiot on a free, Mason Mount for 55, Holland for 55, why not get a keeper next? You could afford it. They could afford
Especially since they've been scouting him for months. Like, I don't think we've ever scouted a player as much as we've scouted Costa.
I mean, and part of the nature of that is we have a couple dedicated Portugal scouts, and pretty much everybody you'd want to scout plays for, Benfica or Porto in the end, or Sporting.
True.
And so they can mostly watch every game. But it is true. They've been scouting him a long time. They've been looking in Portugal a long time, and somehow we're still not getting many players from there. But, he's definitely far and away top of the list if they can get to it. And it feels like it's starting to open up that maybe there's a way, that to get there.
Come on.
I certainly feel like that's a priority for me. When the Athletic put out that it was the right back and a midfielder and then a striker, I was like, I didn't really understand the right back, because I'd much rather go another season with Wan-Bissaka and Dalot competing together than having De Gea for another season. Because as much as his shot stopping brings comfort in a lot of many situations, playing out from the back is what Erik ten Hag wants to do, and he kind of
not even just that though, is it, Nick? It's like playing out from the back, like sweeping, claiming crosses, and just being it's everything except, and even his shot stopping's not been amazing this season either.
Statistically, like I remember
and especially the later Ajax sides, his goalkeeper would play so high. In and out of possession, it's almost like another center back, how high he would be up there. And if that's the direction we're going, you got to think it's got to be solved somehow.
I hope so. Fingers crossed on that. But yeah, this all kind of leads into one thing, doesn't it? The ownership situation. We've kind of already touched on it already. But there are rumours we're not going to hear anything until the FA Cup now, which is just ridiculous. The fact that they announced in November strategic alternatives, and then we're still sat here now discussing it, is mental in my opinion. But you had the initial reports, didn't you, a few weeks ago, probably months back now, that Sir Jim Ratcliffe was favourite, and then you got Sheikh Jassim putting an 11th hour bid. Can you clean any of this mess up for United fans who are struggling to understand what the fuck is going on?
Yeah, I can attempt to, obviously different to part of the biggest problem, right, with all of this is, and I think you had Laurie on yesterday, who Laurie Whitwell, who spoke about this too, and made this point, which is that most of your football journalists, this is not their forte. Yep. This isn't it. This isn't what their connections are about. This isn't what they're experts in. This isn't, where they have good sources. They're pretty reliant on what's being briefed out there to people, right? And a lot of the difficulty you've had here is almost all of the information has been briefed by one party or the other. And the problem with it is, of course, it's heavily biased each way, right? In both directions. If Ineos is briefing to the Times that they're doing this and they're confident of that, that's just their side of the story. If Qatar is saying we're confident and we're this and that, that's just their side of the story. There's a few, there's a few journalists who are not usually the football people that are very well worth paying attention to, because their information is going to be likely more neutral. And that's where you're getting Mark Kleiman at Sky, who was the original guy who said, United are approaching a strategic review. You look at all his news, it's all banking and finance. That's where he's at. So it's not Qatar for him. It's not Ineos for him. It's Rain Group for him. And so it's tough, because it's about evaluating where the information comes from and how seriously you could take it is part of it. And the reality of the situation is, as far as I've heard, again, my side, it's not somebody briefing me where they're expecting to be put out. It just so happens, similar to how I get news on transfers, mine comes mostly from one direction. I trust it because it's not a brief. It's not like I'm being sent, here's your press release or something like that. I say very little. I trust it because it's their honest understanding of the situation of the person that I speak with. And from their side, from Ineos' side, them feeling confident is kind of neither here nor there, because anybody can feel confident. That's not how it's going to end up. It's up to Rain Group and however, but they do feel as though they're moving forward, even over this last 3-4 weeks while it's been quiet. There was an article in Times that did say this, which was that if it was going to be the Ineos offer for the 51%, that results in later buyouts for the Glazer siblings, the two Glazer siblings. Maybe it ends up only being one. You never know. That's the type of thing that could change in this. Maybe Joel decides he wants out. It's just Avram who remains in and gets bought at a later date. These are the types of negotiations that can go on that would take some weeks and some time to put in place. And my perspective on it right now is mostly to tell people to take the kind of almost Occam's razor on this. There's no big conspiracies. There's no big deals that are all wrapped up behind the scenes with this person and that person, like you see rumored out there. It's very likely that Rain Group, one, are just handling the deal as it stands. They're the ones responsible for it. The Glazers can't be bothered to be that active about the club. They're certainly not talking every day to people about the sale. I promise you that. Rain Group are handling it. They're likely working through the offer from Ineos and discussing the details of it behind the scenes. They have the latest bid from Sheikh Jassim. And if it's been reported by someone like Kleiman that Ineos is leading, we take it at face value because it's probably the best reporter to listen to on that. But it doesn't mean, again, that it's done. If I'm going to speculate a little bit further, I would say I think it's pretty dang close. And likely, after the FA Cup, within a few days, you will likely see it moving towards a conclusion. And it's probably the 51% buyout with the two Glazer siblings remaining. I think that's the far more likely scenario than anything else right now.
I think it's just before you get into your thing, Dave, I think it's important to mention that as well, because there's a lot of United fans out there who are just believing everything they see. And I've been a victim of it like a while ago. Everything I saw, I was like, oh my God, Neymar signing, what, blah, blah, blah. And obviously, the more I've done this for the past couple of years, the more I've kind of come to the thing where like 5% you read is actually true. So I think I'm happy you've mentioned that because, yeah, there's a lot of people putting stuff out there. I'm not going to mention the accounts, but everybody knows them. There's people putting stuff out like, this has happened, this is doing this, and you're just like, mate, stop trying to get, clicks and engagement when you don't know you don't have a clue what's going on. Dave, sorry, I interrupted you.
Yeah, no worries. I was just going to ask you, James, how does it feel to be a shill for Ineos?
Sorry, give me that again. Shilling for
How
Ineos?
does it
How
feel
much
to
am I
be a
getting paid?
shill for Ineos? Yeah, exactly. No,
It's great. It's great.
Yeah, I'm obviously kidding, but
Yeah.
that's basically, if anybody who's not seen any of James's videos and videos from the Muppetiers, James gets accused of that quite a lot, being like anti-Qatar. Oh, you just want to gym, you hate Qatar. I imagine you get called racist. I don't know.
All the time.
How do you? It's just a thing of, in my opinion, people. It's not, if it's something that you don't want to hear, you take it. People tend to take it extremely personally. So I was just wondering how you deal with it. It mustn't be easy taking that kind of stuff every day.
Pretty much, it just comes down to that, and that's where I've kind of warned people off. Is if someone's telling you everything you want to hear, I mean, come on, life doesn't work that way.
Yeah.
Rarely is it everything you want to hear is what's happening, and it happens with transfers. You tell people, I'm reminded of it. It's always the same. A year ago, almost, not to the day, but about a year ago exactly, the day before Gerard Romero went on his stream and said Frankie de Jong was 95% done to Manchester United, I was told very reliably that he said no, that he's not going to join United. The day before I said that. And I know it was true. I'm 100% sure of it. And then that comes out and you have to think, how do you deal with this? And so you get the same kind of pressure, the same kind of attacks to what you're saying, to this and that. And I had to maintain for weeks and weeks and weeks, Frankie de Jong does not want to join United. And then in the end result, you get, it turns out, and you gain credibility by standing firm on the things that regardless. It doesn't bother me, to be quite honest. Like, it really doesn't bother me. It's nameless, faceless accounts, things like that. It doesn't bother you. It's like, come on, it's fine though. I mean, for some people it would, and my only suggestion for that would be, obviously, it kind of comes with the territory. I don't think there's anything you can do if you're putting your face out there, your name out there, yourself out there, to talk to people, to have followers, to have views, to have any of that. You're always going to deal with it for one reason or another. You're always going to deal with it, and the best way is just to be, authentically yourself and not worry about it. So
It makes it easier as well if Sir Jim's just slipping your money under the table.
Ignore the grenadier in the driveway, okay? Nothing to do with it.
James, I know you slightly pushed with time, so Shreyas, if you just want to dive into yours.
No, we're good. Go for it. I got it.
All right, cool. Yeah, go for it.
What do you need?
I just wanted to ask that, realistically, what should be the target for next season? Like, we've seen that Erik ten Hag has pretty much overachieved by quite a margin this season. He's achieved top 4. He hit a FA Cup final as well. We have already won a trophy in the Carabao Cup. So, considering we are able to pull off a very good window in the summer window, what do you think should be the goal next season?
Well, yeah, that's a good qualifier to it. If they can pull off a good window, bring in a good striker, bring in someone like Mount, hopefully a goalkeeper too, because frankly, I feel so strongly that if we don't get a goalkeeper, you cut those ambitions down. You're not winning the league with David De Gea in that. Not in this team. It's not happening. You're not going to win the Champions League with it either. So, I mean, you saw it even against Sevilla, I think. Yeah, we couldn't even win Europa with it,
Sorry, did you watch that game last night, by the way? It's awful.
Oh,
Sevilla oh my God. Sorry, terrible game. I don't know how we lost to them, but sorry.
Yeah, no worries. So, given that qualifier, if we have a good window, we get the major targets in that are needed. I could, consider there's, top 4 in a trophy being a success very much a success for a first season. For most years, top 4 in a trophy is decent. Obviously, that's not the aspiration or the target. Is it enough to win the league yet next year? Probably not. But United should be in the discussion, having a good window. There is the factor of time. I mean, time in the project. if Ten Hag were to win the league next year, probably be one of the most impressive, things to accomplish given the state of things, given the time that Pep Guardiola's had with the squad, given the time Klopp's had with the squad, given the time Arteta's had with the squad, now going into 4 years. You don't usually get that in the modern day, being that far behind with such established top coaches like Klopp and Pep and all of that. And Liverpool probably not going to have a down year as much as this year based on the end of year form. I think they're going to be, and they're actually rebuilding their midfield, getting good players in. They're going to be up there again.
Exactly.
Definitely.
They should be in the discussion. So, I don't know how many points we're going to end this year off with. Bump it up by 10 to 12. That's probably at least what United should be aiming for. Get some big wins, be in the discussion. You never know what could happen, obviously, like with Arsenal and all that, you never know. So you want to be there or thereabouts, you don't want to be out of the race in January, I guess is what I'm saying. You want to be in there in the discussion in March, in the discussion, and that it's close and that you're challenging in the way that Liverpool often did over the last 5 years, even though, City ended up winning most all of them. And then a deep run in Champions League. We can't be getting grouped. That can't happen. That to me is unacceptable moving forward. It was unacceptable when it happened under Ollie. We can't be getting grouped. We got to be getting into deep into those knockout rounds. Obviously, you can get an unlucky matchup and right after the groups, but ideally into that final, 4-8 is where United have to be getting to moving forward.
Well, speaking of unlucky matchups, we're in pot 2 and Sevilla are in pot 1.
I know, right? But they're the Europa Kings, okay? They're
Oh
the
my
Europa
God.
Kings.
Oh,
So
yeah.
I
That's true. They'll probably
fully
finish third and win
expect.
Europa.
Yeah, I fully expect we get them, and if we get them, they somehow get dropped from the group into Europa, even as the top of the group.
Going in for the 9th millionth time. To be fair, everything you mentioned there, Laurie mentioned yesterday with the interview. I don't know if any of you guys who are in the chat currently have seen it or not. Make sure you check it out after this video. But yeah, they were saying a similar thing. Like, it's hard because there's not much margin, is there? You talk about you get 75 points, you get a trophy and another trophy when we beat City on Saturday, which we are doing, by the way. Then he's like, well, if you go spend another 200 million on top of that, 150 million, where do you go then? Because people might be expecting a title charge. The media might be spinning it in that kind of sense. So I don't know. I do think they might hunt him a little bit next season once, we've had another transfer window and another 200 million pounds.
Because after money, it's time. You just need time.
Exactly.
Frankly.
Of course.
You got to have time to work it through.
Yeah, for sure. Shreya, just keep an eye on the chat. If there's any quick fire questions before we go, just please do pull them up. But the final question I wanted to ask you, James, is not really a football topic or anything, but what is your proudest moment whilst you've been working and building the Muppetiers? What do you think's been your proudest moment?
Good question. I would say part of it is this takeover process in general, because obviously it's been the biggest topic from the start. For years, obviously, everybody knows United fan, Glazer's out. This has been more than any transfer, the most important thing at United by far for a decade now, or longer. And, it's been such a long process. You mentioned that in November, that's when the strategic alternatives came out. Well, if you know that months prior, we were talking about it because over summer, we were told, like by July, that they were exploring a sale, and that Avram Glazer had come over. He had come over early on in the season, or before even the season started. And there was a meeting, and they decided at that point in time they were going to explore a sale. And we got wind of that, and it was very difficult to explore. You had a lot of conflicting things. You had an article, believe it or not, I mean, some people have seen this, from the New York Times themselves, saying that Manchester United was not for sale. And it was. And we had to stick through that and work through that. And then eventually, and then there was a time when there was an article from Bloomberg that was supposed to come out that said it was for sale, and they ended up changing it last second to say it was up for partial sale, like a minority investment type of thing, which wasn't the truth. Again, I don't know why they backtracked on that, but they did. And we had to keep kind of fighting through it and sticking with it. And the club is for sale and is most likely to be sold through all the rumors, through everything that's happened. And then when they announced the strategic alternatives, it was like a huge win. But but it's continued to be, regardless of the outcome. I think it's obvious now that the far more likely scenario is that somebody takes over from the Glazers, and sticking by that outcome, and that it wasn't going to be likely someone like, some minority investment. We hope. I mean, there's still the chance of it because it's the Glazers, right? Right. We hope, but point being that the sale process itself and the fact that that was happening, I think is the best thing, and having it be something that everybody in the United fan base is on the same side of for once. Being able to talk through that, cover that, go over that, and have that actually come out was like, that was cool. That was cool to see as a fan base, but it was cool as part of a community, running a community, to have that happen and have it be like, this is the real thing. So I think that would be it.
Yeah, I love that. And also as a community as well, and as a channel all started, the green and gold colours, our whole theme is because we want the Glazers gone. 18 years of terrible ownership, and hopefully after the FA Cup fight, should have been done earlier, but hopefully, fingers crossed, it gets resolved. Yeah. Shreyas, did you have any quick ones before we go?
There's just been an altercation between Sir Jim fans and Qatari fans, and
of course,
except that I was able to spot out one comment which said, "Ask James if he knows who designs United's kits because these new kits are shocking."
That's obviously going to be divisive. That I have no idea who designs the kits. Obviously, it's someone at Adidas rather than United.
A junior designer by the looks of things.
I like the home kit quite a lot. I don't mind. It's one of the best home kits in a long time. I really, really am not a fan of the other ones.
The humble one.
You brought on the third kit, didn't you? Because you tagged it. I saw your picture you put up, James, of the what's it called, that Liverpool kit.
Yeah, it looks just like the Liverpool kit. And let me say this to compare it to. This year's white away kit is one of the best ones we've had in years.
Yeah,
it's beautiful. And the comparison of this one to that one, to me, is just a huge downgrade in terms of a white kit.
Yeah, and the BTEC Newcastle one as well
it is green actually. It's
that one's going to be one we're going to have to see in person, because we had that kit years ago.
There's a picture of Malacia wearing it.
Yeah, well, that makes it easy. Like, you get, like people have been saying, you get Beckham in it, and then you can decide.
That's what I mean. Yeah, then you're like,
Beckham could make a turd look good, if we're being completely honest. Oh, yeah, it is what it is. But look, I think that's a perfect way to kind of end it. We appreciate you coming on, James, and I think a lot of United fans who be watching this, who of course would have followed you over from your channel and obviously our community as well, would have appreciate you coming on, because in the time of where you got clickbait stories and nonsensical things, you actually provide clarity on a lot of the situations. And good, hard, solid information. So we appreciate you coming on. We'd love to have you on again at some point. But yeah, unless you've got any final kind of words, we can end the show.
Yeah, thanks very much for having me. I'm definitely happy to come on anytime.
Yeah, perfect. Thank you very much. Cheers for watching, guys. Make sure you subscribe to the channel, smash a like on the video, and check our interview out with Laurie Whitwell if you've missed that. Yesterday, I think it was. I'm losing track of days. Loads of footage filmed today as well, so check that out. And we'll see you guys in the next one. Take care of yourselves. Peace.